Hey guys, it's Emily from Robin's Nest Handmade. Join me today. We are making an adult size hand knit chunky blanket. So all you need are your hands, no other tools required except a pair of scissors. And for this blanket, we need 6 skeins of size 7 jumbo yarn. So when you go shop for yarn, you want to look at the back of the label. And right here, this little picture that looks like a skein of yarn, it should say 7 jumbo. That just makes the best hand knit throws. So this is going to be a very beginner tutorial, so no experience required at all. And please follow along, and I can't wait to see what you guys make. All right, let's get started. The yarn I'm using today is Bernat blanket yarn, big bold. If you flip over to the back of the label, right here it says jumbo size 7. That's the weight I recommend for my blankets. This happens to be a really unique yarn, so I'm really excited to see how this blanket turns out. Also on the back of the label, you can see the washing instructions here, and this is polyester. I actually got this yarn at Michael's. We happened to be out of town, and you see the regular price is $9.99. I forget what I even paid, but I got 6 of them, but there were actually only 6 left. So it's just ironic that there was just enough left for me to make an adult size throw, and I was like, this is just gonna make a beautiful blanket. So let's just get started. I'm gonna leave that there. One of my balls of yarn actually just kind of made a mess in storage, so I'm gonna go and start with that one. Looks like on the end of this yarn is some kind of contest, but you know, we missed the deadline for that, so get rid of that. So when you start with your blanket yarn, the first thing you're gonna do is tie a knot at the end. This is going to help keep your yarn from unraveling, and also when you weave it in to your finished work, like over here, it'll keep it from slipping out. So after you tie a knot, take your scissors and cut the tail. Now when you cut this yarn, it is going to leave some fuzzies behind, so just be aware of that. Kind of just fluff it all out. Push that to the side. Okay, so let's get started. We are going to start our adult blanket with 26 loops. Now, my lingo is not going to be the same as knitting and crochet terms. I might slip a few in there, but since these are just super beginner tutorials, it really doesn't matter what you call this. But I'm going to start kind of like this. So if you see there, this is how to make a slip knot. You're gonna turn that over on itself, and it's gonna make like a ribbon shape. Put your fingers through the middle of that hole. Reach through, grab that yarn. So you're holding it, pinching it between your 2 fingers here. You're going to grab these 2 strings and pull tight. You'll have to ignore some of the background noise. I don't have a fancy studio or anything like that, so I've got kids and dogs, and yeah. Anyway, we have our slip knot here. You see the loop, it made a knot right there. You can pull it like this to make it tight. So what I'm going to do is, this is the working yarn. Okay, we're going to call that always called the working yarn. We're going to pull the working yarn through this knot to make this loop a little bit smaller. It's about 2 inches long. Okay, now to make our first row, or cast on, or whatever you want to use for the terminology, we need 26 loops for this adult throw. So I have my left hand. I'm going to start by pulling that reaching through with my left fingers like this, grabbing that working yarn and pulling it through. So it's going to look like this. This is considered 2 loops, 1 and 2. I am right-handed. I'm going to go ahead and continue this with my right hand. So I'm going to use my left hand to hold this just to kind of keep it still. I'm going to reach my right 2 fingers in here and pull up another loop. That's 3. Reaching through, pulling up, that's 4. That's 5. Reaching through, that's 6. Reach through, that's 7. So there's 7. So we're on 7. I'm going to reach through, 8, 9, reach through with my 2 fingers and pull up, 10. I'm going to pull some of this working yarn over just so it's easier. And like I said, this is going to be very beginner friendly, so I'm not going to fast forward. If you've already made a few of these blankets, feel free to fast forward and pull through, 2 fingers and pull through and pull through. And I'm actually not keeping count, but I am going to show you how to count the loops at the end. So reaching through, pulling through, sometimes when with this type of yarn, you'll get these random little strings that just are kind of hanging. You can usually pull those out. There. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and count and see what I've got. So putting my chain or foundation row here flat, I'm gonna count all of these top loops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So we'll pull up 19, 20, 21, reaching through, pulling up, 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. So here is roughly about how wide you're going to make this blanket. This is a 6-foot table. It takes up exactly half of the table, so it's about 3 feet wide, so a really good size throw. Okay, so making row number 2, I will say that this is the hardest part, is making this chain or foundation row here and then making the second row. It's just that's just the most confusing part. The rest just goes really smooth and easy. So this is how your work is looking at you. You're gonna take this and flip it upside down. Now when you do that, you're gonna see your work has a top loop, a bottom loop, and a bump in the middle. That's very important because we are actually knitting into these back bumps. So there's a top, a bottom, and that middle bump right there. So what we're gonna do here, to go in to make our first row, I'm gonna take my working yarn and put it up and over the top. And this part here, I'm gonna tuck it underneath that last loop. So it's gonna look like this. All right, so this first loop here, this is where we're going to begin skipping the first loop of every row. So you skip it and you go into this first bump right here. And we tucked our working yarn under. So you're going to reach your fingers through here like this. You're going to grab that yarn and pull up into a loop. And I'm just gonna stretch that loop back out, make sure it's still there, my end loop. Stick with me, guys. I know this feels kind of funky and it looks kind of funky, but the foundation of your blanket will turn out really good. So stick with it. Now, going into my next bump. I pulled up that. I'm gonna look for my next one. So let's see. Sometimes they can be hard to see, but it's right, let's see, top. Let's see, I did that one, top, bottom. And there it is, right there. And right there. Middle, middle, middle. So you see those bumps. I might not be using the greatest yarn because it's variegated and it has the stripes. It makes it a little bit more confusing. I apologize for that. All right, reaching through that middle bump and pulling up a loop. Still continuing to go into these back bumps. So showing top, bottom, and here's that back bump. Guys, stick with it. Like I said, this is the most confusing part, but after this blanket is super easy. So I pulled up. Here's what my loops look like so far. Some of my stitches are looser than the others. That's okay. That's why this bump is just really easy to find. Pulling up. Reaching through the back bump and pulling up. And for those of you who have mastered this already, feel free to skip ahead. I am not fast forwarding this video at all. I really want to make this super beginner friendly, just showing every single step. All right, there's my back bumps that I still have to go. So I'm reaching through with my fingers and pulling up. Reaching through and pulling up. And I just feel like this blanket is going to be just amazing for fall. I bought this yarn to make myself a blanket, but always when I make these, pull up, I never keep anything for myself. I always end up selling it. So I have the craft fair coming up, and I think I'm going to sell it at my booth because it's just perfect for fall. All right, remember, it's gonna look a little bit crazy right now, but just trust the process. All right, back bump right there. I'm gonna pull up there. Top of the stitch, bottom, the back bump, and pull up. There's that back bump, and pull up. Get that away. And just to show you the edges of these blankets, here's a finished baby blanket. Doing it this way is gonna make, I think this was the bottom. It's gonna make the edge look like its own stitch. It just looks really, really nice. And you can see it's starting to form here. And reach through the back bump there, pull up. This yarn is so soft. Oh my goodness. And no judgment. I mean, Walmart has a great selection of yarn. Joann's, Hobby Lobby, Michael's. Buying online, I mean, you get a gamble because you don't get to touch or see it in person. But just get out there and start crafting. Dollar Tree, don't sleep on the Dollar Tree either. They sell Premier Yarn there. The brand Premier Yarns, and that's really great yarn. But crafters, crochet artists, knitters, they go to the Dollar Tree and they buy it out. So keep that in mind. But if you're ever there, look in the craft section for the yarn. All right, just a couple left and our foundation row is done. Went through the back loop, pull up, go through here, pull that up, go through here, pull up. Last one right here. There's our slip knot, top of the stitch, bottom, middle, pull up. First row is done. So I'm gonna go ahead and count these loops. I casted on or chained, whatever wording you want to, made 26 loops to start. I'm just gonna make sure I still have 26. Keep in mind, you can make these blankets as big or as small as you want. My baby blankets are casting on 14 loops. I do the adult size throws as, I say adult size, but of course they make great gifts for teenagers too, or even kids who just love a big blanket. I do 26. So here's how I'm gonna count those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and that first stitch that we skipped makes 26. And my son is just desperate to sneak into these videos here. We just finished our first row. You can see the loops up at the top, ready for row number 2. So our working yarn is now on the left side of our work. I have it kind of here in a jumbled mess. However, that just helps keep it nice and loose. I'm gonna pull some up to the top here, just to make it easier. So always, this is the tail at the beginning, left side of the work. Always with your first loop. This is really important. We skip this first loop at the start of every row. So, at the start of this row, I'm going to skip this loop. After we go down the row and come back, we are going to go pick up this loop. So, it sounds confusing now, but just watch. This is going to make the edge of our blankets, thank you, look like its own stitch, just like how the bottom did. So you see that is the edge. We don't have to put a border on these blankets. They just turn out amazing. You still can put a border on, but this just makes it a complete finished blanket and looks really nice. So starting here, here's my working yarn. I'm just gonna knit in this direction. We skip this loop. I'm gonna go into the second loop right here with my fingers. And I'm gonna pull up one loop. So this is gonna hang out. It's gonna look like it's hanging to the side here, but don't worry. When we come back, I am gonna pick up this loop, but it's gonna hang out here for now. And now reach through the next and pull up and so on down your blanket. But like I said, super beginner tutorial. I am not gonna fast forward. If you guys feel like you got this, rock out your blanket. You don't have to watch. But if you're doing this in real time with me, we'll just do it together. These circles, these loops, however tight or loose you make them is up to you. There is a look for those loose, you know, floppy, cozy blankets, similar to what you see for sale at, I think even Hobby Lobby sells them, Pottery Barn. It's just a very popular look. I made my baby blankets a little bit tighter so you can't really see through them. Making it tight makes it a very nice, like play mat, I guess you could say. not play mat, but you could lay a baby on it. It's just very chunky, cozy. You could make a rug out of it. Making it loose, it would drape very well over a couch or a chair. So, continuing on. This is my next loop. I'm gonna reach through and pull up. Reach through and pull up. And don't even sweat it. If some of your loops are tight and some of them are loose and you think your blanket is ruined, don't even worry. You can stretch it out. It makes the stitches a little bit more even in the end. But even if not, you literally made something with your own hands, and there is nothing better than that, seriously. Don't be afraid to mess up. Pulling up, reaching in this loop, pulling up. Yeah, no intimidation here. We were all beginners once. Heck, I just learned how to do this like just a few months ago. Reach through, pull it up. I like to make these on a table like this. It makes it very easy for me to go back and forth, and see everything. And I have dogs, so I just bring this folding table in when I make these blankets, and it just keeps the dog hair off. But feel free to sit on a couch, do this on your lap. This is your craft. Make it how you want. My first baby blanket I actually made on the floor. It was a gift for a friend. Hi, Courtney, if you're watching. I made her a gift, a blanket, and it was right after I mopped the floor, and I just laid it out there and watched my own YouTube tutorials on how to make those. All right, we're down to the end of our row, if you see here. I just went into this loop here. I have 2 left. So I'm gonna go into this one. You see the back, I'm reaching through, pulling up. Now here is that last loop. We skipped this loop at the start of this row, and that's why it looks like it's hanging out to the side. We are going to go into this loop because we are at the end of our row. So I'm reaching through this loop with my 2 fingers, and I am going to pull up in that loop. And you can kind of see already, it turned this stitch sideways to make a nice bordered edge. Where's the bottom of my blanket? There's the bottom, and it just continues to the side. It looks really nice. And your second row is complete. Starting row 3. I have this first loop here. It's hanging out to the side a little bit. I'm going to skip that first loop. There's my working yarn in the back here. I'm going into the second loop, and I'm going to pull up. So the start of this third row looks like this. Skipped loop here, hanging to the side. First loop I went into. But this counts as 2 stitches. We're counting this as a stitch. When we come back this direction, we're going to go into the stitch, and it's continuing to make this edge. So, went into the second loop, going into the third, like this. Pulling up. All these loops, I'm reaching in with my fingers and pulling up. Reaching in, pulling up. This is the adult throw tutorial. I am going to do a baby blanket tutorial and even a bigger throw or queen size blanket. So you can see how my blanket is turning out already. Looking great. I did a unique, colorway here with my yarn. I have done solid blankets. I did the rainbow blanket, which was its own color of yarn, its own colorway. I love how that turned out. I'm definitely going to get more of that yarn. Pulling up, pulling up, pulling up. And see how now you're at the point where your blanket is just easy. You can watch TV. I like to listen to audiobooks or podcasts. Reaching in. You can just zone out and, let your fingers do the work. It's very stress relieving, fiber arts in general, crochet, knitting. It involves, you know, using both sides of your brain, they've said. So the cross between your left and right brain, it is supposed to be very anxiety relieving, relieve stress. And just to show you guys here, my stitches are mostly uniform. I did have a pretty loose stitch here, just that loop right there. I'm not even gonna sweat it, just pull it up. It's all gonna work out in the end. It's gonna look amazing anyway. We're just having fun. It is perfect time now. It's fall right now, almost fall. I guess you could say it's September when I'm making this video. Perfect time to start making Christmas gifts. Pull up. And there's the end of this next row. I've lost count. I'm not counting the rows, I'm not counting the stitches, but I'm at the end. We did skip this loop when we started the last row, so it's hanging out here to the side. You can see. I'm going into this loop because we're at the end. So I'm reaching through. All right, so this last loop, I'm gonna reach in there, pull up. Another row complete. My gosh, it's turning out so good. Starting the next row. I have my working yarn here, pulling it over. Skipping this first loop. We're making that edge of our blanket that way. Going into the second, right here. Reach in, pull up. That's gonna hang to the side there like that. And on down this row. Kids are outside building a bonfire with Dad, and probably can still hear them with this microphone, so screaming and having fun. All right, just continuing to go into all of these loops, pulling up. Starting to get to the end. This is all the yarn I have left here of this skein, so we'll be ready for a second one pretty soon. I love the variegated yarns, like the rainbow blanket, like this. Just the difference in colors really adds a nice look to your blankets. There's a place for the solid colors too, but I do like the different colored ones. All right, we're at the end of our row here. And you can see here, that's the last loop in our row. We are going to go into this loop. And our edge is looking nice. Starting on to this next row. So I'm going to skip this, go into the second loop, and pull up. So I think I'm at the point now, I'm going to continue on until I get to the end of my yarn, and I will show you guys how to tie on your next skein and do a couple more rows on that. I do have some TikTok videos about how to fix some troubleshooting mistakes for what happens if you miss a loop and discover it later. So make sure you check those out. If I come across any mistakes that happen, I will point those out as they come. I'll maybe make a separate YouTube video on those. But look how this is turning out so far. So good. I'm getting to the end of this row and the end of my skein. I'm gonna go ahead and tie right here. You can see where my yarn's kind of coming apart at the end. That does happen sometimes with these yarns, but here's my next skein of yarn. I'm gonna reach in and see if I can find a middle. No. So I'm just gonna rip the label off, find the end. There it is. So here's the first skein of yarn that I'm almost done with, my new skein right here. I'm gonna go ahead and tie these together. And I'm gonna circle around and just pull all the yarn through that circle and pull as tight as I can. Give it a good tug that way. I think our knot is good. And I'm gonna clip the tails. All right, ignore some of the fuzzies that come off. All right, now we have joined our two skeins together, and we'll just keep going. Up. That's where my knot is, right there. So I'm gonna pull up into this loop. The knot decided to go through there. That's okay. Once this is all worked up, I will come back and show you that you can't even tell where the knot is. Pulling up a loop, and we're at our, oops. And we're at our end right here. We are going into this loop. So I'm reaching in and pulling up a loop. All right, another row complete and moving on in the next direction. I'm gonna go ahead and keep recording, but I am not gonna go slow. I'm gonna go at my usual speed here. Skipping that first loop right here, I'm gonna go into the second. And so on down the row. And just by the odds of how the yarn is, it seems that we have some areas that are staying mostly tan and mostly striped. They're just kind of working their way in, looking pretty cool. So when you pull up these loops, there really is no rhyme or reason to the size loop I just pull up, I don't know, about 2 inches, and that's how I'm getting this size of a stitch. You can certainly make yours tighter or looser depending on what look you are going for, what you like. And second to last, I'm going in there. Last loop is hanging off to the side here. Don't forget that last loop. I'm going to go in and pull it up. The edge of our blanket, looking very nice. When I go back on this row, I'll show you where the knot is. There is a way to knot these together apparently without tying a knot, but I am keeping it simple and just tying a knot to connect my 2 skeins of yarn. There's our knot right there. It fit perfectly between these 2 rows of stitches. Couldn't even see it. All right, I'm at the end of my row, but don't forget this stitch out here to the side. You are going to go into this stitch. Pull up. And I guess I can say we encountered our first problem here I'd like to show you guys. So if you see this loop right here, well, I caught it early because when I go across here, I'm going to encounter the problem of, I guess the technical terms is a slipped stitch. It came out of this loop. So it's a really easy fix when you discover it. You'll notice the back of all these loops have kind of this yarn wrapped around here. This one obviously does not. It looks different. So to fix it, all that happened was this loop came out. So you're just going to reach in, pull that back up, and your loop is back. So now that I'm starting this next row going this direction, I always knit on a table, like I said before. You can do it on your lap on the couch, but this way I can just go back and forth all the way up my blanket, and it just makes it easier for me to keep track and not lose these stitches. So I'm skipping the first, going into the second. Pull some of that out, oops. And pulling up as we go. Alright, well, I will see you guys when it's time to connect our third skein. Alright, so getting it to the end of the second skein, it's looking really nice. Just pulling up the loops. At the end of this row here. Last loop here, I'm going to go in that loop. So now this makes the first loop of my next row. I'm going to skip it and just let it hang to the side there, but go into the next and on down until I get a little closer to the end to connect another skein. Also, the tightness of your loops and the stitches that you make will determine really how big the blanket is in a way, because knitting these a little bit tighter, you're gonna make a little bit of a tighter, like smaller blanket. It's still adult throw size, but if you knit super loose, it's gonna make just a bigger blanket. So we're getting to the end here. This yarn was in the middle. I'm gonna grab another skein of yarn, take the label off, and find the end. Just tucked in right there. I'm gonna tie my 2 skeins together. All right, pull those through, and there's your knot. And I'm gonna pull my strings tight and give it a tug on each side to make sure. Now I'm gonna cut the ends, the tails. That's what they're called, just like that. And we're ready to keep going. So I ended right here. I'm going this direction. Still can't decide if I want to keep this blanket or sell it at my craft show this weekend. Oh my gosh, I love it. I originally bought this yarn for myself, but as always, I'm like, oh, this could be really popular. So my knot just happened to work out, so it's gonna get hidden right there. I'm just gonna keep pulling up. came across another little mistake here. Not mistake, but just troubleshooting. I was getting ready to go into this loop and now I see that the yarn came out. An easy fix. So I'm just going to reach my fingers in that loop and pull back up. Now when I did that, it also pulled this one. I'm just gonna make sure those are all steady. So, pulling up, and the end of the row here, I am pulling up into this loop. All right, starting another row. Skipping this one, I'm just gonna let it hang to the side. Look how nice our edge is looking. Looks super good. All right, now, some string stuck on there. Oh. And sometimes this happens with these big bulky yarns. I'm not gonna try to pull on it. I don't wanna unravel anything. I'm just gonna clip it right there. All right, skipping this first one, going into the second. And I'm gonna just keep rocking this blanket. We're down to the end of our last skein. So here is our wonderful blanket. So when I get to this point, or when it gets this long, I start rolling it up just to make it easier for me to work on. But let's finish this together. Let's see where I'm at, down at this row. So I'm right here, at the beginning of a new row. I'm skipping the first chain. It's gonna hang, or loop here, it's gonna hang to the side. Pulling up. Pulling up. And all the way down. So close. So for these adult size throws, I really like to do 6 skeins. And I go until the skeins are almost, till the last one's, almost gone, then I'll finish. But this is your blanket, so make it however you want. If you prefer a shorter blanket, feel free to use 5 skeins. Or if you're making a smaller blanket, like a lap blanket, even 4. Like I said, it's your blanket, so just make it how you want. I like the size of 6. That's my preference. And that's how I'm basing my tutorial. Alright, so another loop kind of came out here. You can see the yarn hanging out in the back. I'm just going to pull that loop back up and go into that loop. All right, the last loop hanging out to the side here. I'm pulling up that loop. The edge is looking wonderful. All right. So to have enough yarn to finish off on your blanket, look just how amazing. I'm going to keep it rolled up here. You need enough yarn to go across the width of your blanket 3 times, and I'll show you what I mean by that after I get this off. Oh my goodness. All right, so the yarn you have left needs to go across your work 3 times. So starting, here's 1 and 2 and 3. Oh boy, that is cutting it pretty close. We're just gonna go for it though. So starting with this first loop, we usually skip the first loop, but for the finishing edge, we are going to go through it. So 2 loops, pull up. Keeping that loop on your finger, Grab the next and pull up through both of those. Keep that on your fingers and get the next. Pull up. Get the next loop. Pull up. Pull up. Get the next. All right. So you keep this loop on your fingers, get the next loop on your fingers, so you have 2 loops. Get your working yarn and pull through both of those loops. Pull through those, grab both loops, pull through. And here's what our edge is looking like. Very nice. All right. Get 2 loops on, pull through, another 2 loops, grab this loop, so you have 2 loops, pull through, 2 loops, two loops, pull through those. So you're knitting 2 loops together. I believe that is the correct terminology for that. Pull those. Grab those. Down to the last 3. So there's 2 together. All right, last loop. Don't forget the loop that's hanging out kind of to the side. Grab that and pull through. Now from here, you'll want to finish off. I always create a knot in all of my work. That's just because I'm a crocheter. I've always done this. I always want to make sure that my work doesn't come undone. So what I'm gonna do, since now I have extra yarn left over, I'm gonna go ahead and cut my yarn tail a little bit shorter. So I'm just gonna cut right here. Get rid of some of that extra yarn. Now, I knit those last 2 loops together, and here is the last loop as a result. To make a knot in this, you want to grab the yarn, pull it all the way through, like this, and pull tight. And then that is not coming out. Make sure it's tight. It makes a knot right there. But now we need to hide our yarn tails from our beginning and our end of our blanket. Okay, so I've turned my blanket sideways so that you can see both of the yarn tails. I've got the first one here. This is what we started with after our slip knot. So I'm just gonna make sure my knot is tight. This is kind of a long yarn tail, longer than I want to have to weave in. So I'm going to make another knot just a little bit farther down. And cut the tails right there. Alright. And then to weave this in, you're just going to pass this through, just no special way, just through some of the stitches here. That knot on the end is going to help make it stay in place as well. So I went through that way. I'm just going to kind of go through some of these stitches here. Maybe pass it through this way.
one more for good measure. And kind of stretch it out so that you can't see it. So now the beginning of your blanket is secure and the tail, the yarn tail, is just hidden right there. Let's go to the top of our blanket where we just finished. We are going to make a knot in this yarn tail. So maybe right there. I'm just going to make a circle and pull the string through all the way. Then you can cut the yarn tail right there. Maybe pull some little fuzzies out. Alright, and here's the top corner of your blanket. You just need to weave that through any way you want, just to hide the yarn tail. So you go through that, push it through the top, front, and sideways maybe right there. Just keep feeding it through, passing it through until you have nothing left, and give your blanket a good stretch and you can't see it. So guys, we have completed an adult size throw. Edges are wonderful, so is the top and bottom. Let's take this outside in the daylight and show you what it looks like when it's all done.